he should have a story. And I share this with all of my colleagues who I have the privilege to work with in my current assignment as the president of the Observer Research Foundation, which is India's largest research and public policy think tank. I always tell them that research writing today must be about telling stories, sharing experiences, sharing discoveries, or learning together. You must have a script in your mind. You must have a head, a body, and a tail. I think sometimes as researchers we tend to obsess with the process rather than the communication. And I encourage all our young fellows to be storytellers. Research must reach out to many more people than it has done in the past. What should you write on is something deeply personal. Your writings must reflect your person. For me, a research is as good as the scholar that pursues it. So the scholar and the research must have a symbiotic relationship. If you are someone who cares about certain issues, those are the issues that you must tell stories on, you must write articles on, you must pursue research about. Research that does not have a passionate scholar undertaking it will seem and sound and read hollow. So please be passionate about the articles you want to write. They must appeal to you, they must come from within. Personally, I have engaged on two issues over the longest time. The first, of course, is on climate change and sustainability. This was something that I truly believed in. I believed there was an embedded injustice in the way the world had structured its approach to climate change. We saw the rich countries consume most of the fossil fuels, extract much of the resources, live lavish lifestyles, and at some point they decided that the poorer and the developing countries did not have the right to seek that same kind of life. And I believed it was patently wrong. I was of the view that there must be something that should change, and I made that my mission in my writing on seeking equity, seeking equality, seeking climate justice. And many of my articles in my earlier part of my career as a scholar focused on this. My book, in fact, my first book was on India's climate identity and how India must not only allow its people to grow but must take a global leadership role on carving a new architecture. These days I'm extremely passionate about technology, on what it is doing to our societies, what it is doing to governments, what it is doing to people, how is it challenging some of the old paradigms and old assumptions. And that passion helps me wield my pen. The advantage today is that there is a whole community of scholars, of writers, of thinkers, easily accessible to all the young minds. I had that advantage as well. I mean, I moved from the private sector to academia only 11 years ago, and I was in many ways a young beginner at the age of 37, and I reached out to people. I reached out to those who had walked this path before, not because I wanted to ape them or mimic them or copy them or write what they had written, but because I wanted to understand how they would prepare for their research, what are the sources they would tap into, what is the community they would reach out to, how would they organize the research. I think Google and the internet generally is a boon for researchers. It tells you what's out there. If you were to limit your entire engagement of research with Google or with the internet, you would lose out on precious opportunity to meet people, to engage with them, to reach out to scholars, to reach out to publics who you are wanting to feature in your broader project. So while the internet provides you a library of information on your fingertips, basically on your palm top, I think the exciting part of research is engaging with people, engaging with your sectors that you are trying to work on. For example, I've co-authored a monograph with a colleague of mine on the future of work, where we have surveyed 870 enterprises and how they visualize the role of women, the role of technology, paychecks, social protections, etc. Now, one way of doing this was to send just digital surveys to all of them to fill and engage with those responses and produce a cogent paper. The other was that even as you do this larger exercise, you should pick up a small sample of 30, 40, 50 odd individuals who you will take more, who you would reach out to in a more personalized manner. I think the structure of the paper is extremely important. In an old-fashioned way, they would tell you, you must have a research question, you must have a research methodology, you must engage with existing literature and theories, you must thereafter produce a methods section which organizes your quantitative or qualitative elements of your research, and finally you must share your findings and conclusions. I think it's time to perhaps take the best of that and create a new format which is far more engaging. I think research and writing research and presenting research is no different to producing a television series or a movie or an exciting book. A story has to be embedded in that research. Like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we must have the central proposition as the head of the article, as the head of that research. What are we trying to communicate? Thereafter, we must work on that in the middle of our articles and of our communications, and bring out all the nuances around that central proposition that we are exploring, and finally conclude with our opinions, our assessments, and our analysis on what the next steps or the conclusions should be. I think the first step is write a paper. After you have taken advice, after you have a central investigation, query, hypothesis, after you have worked that hypothesis, after you have studied what has already been written, after you have explored the new element you are proposing to introduce to the conversation, to the subject, to the debate, and after you have put it all together, the challenges of publishing it and making it reach many people. Now, in many cases, before you begin the process of research itself, you have already tied up with certain mediums, certain publishing houses, certain platforms to use your work. That happens when you have a bit of an experience, bit of a brand, bit of a name. You would already have multiple avenues before you would have produced anything. For newcomers, it's slightly more tedious, but there are more opportunities today than ever before. There are more platforms available for publishing your articles and your research papers than what existed, say, a decade ago. I would fundamentally pose and respond to the whole proposition of publishing through asking the scholar as to whom he wants to reach through his writings. If it is the mass public, then what you produce out of your research must be in mediums which take it to a broader audience. If it is to a community of experts, then you require different kind of journals to reach out to. And if it is something that you want to make popular and easily consumable, then your research has to be broken into different products that can be put out as commentaries and op-eds, that could be nifty short articles, that could also be small short papers in big journals. So I think it depends on who you want to reach out to. For me, I think it has to be a mix of all three. Research cannot be any more confined to limited spaces. When I write articles, when I write long form, when I've written a couple of books and I'm writing 2 more, and which are being released in the next few months. I will be certainly putting out smaller versions of my book for wider reach. While my book may sell 8,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 copies, my articles reach 1 million people. That can be communicated in commentaries, that could be communicated through Twitter bites, that could be produced through 3-minute online videos, and the whole plethora of communication options that are available today. You will find many takers. There are many options today. Certainly for the modern school scholars who want to pursue this path, the Observer Research Foundation would be very happy to engage with you. I will be happy to publish your research for you to begin your career. Technology is changing the world. The role of government, the role of companies, the role of communities have all dramatically altered with the introduction of the digital medium. Many of the old organizations, say for example the trade unions or the political parties, or say even think tanks and organizations like ours, may not be as influential as before. Today communities can mobilize across hashtags. You saw what Greta Thunberg did when she was able to mobilize the whole planet on climate change. Do you think the traditional think tanks or political parties or climate organizations could have created the mass hysteria a young determined woman using digital tools was able to do? Perhaps no. Similarly, you saw the Me Too movement. Hashtag Me Too was able to mobilize women across the world and challenge the patriarchy and misogyny that existed on the planet. But we are also seeing the harsh side of technology. The states have more influence and more capabilities to control their citizens using technology. The surveillance state is a reality. Be it the Americans, be it the Chinese, be it the Indians, states are deploying multiple technologies to be able to interfere, to be able to enter our living rooms and drawing rooms and even bedrooms. And that is the second side of technology, that the state is also far more powerful than it ever was. And finally, I think on the economic side, there are so many more opportunities for so many more people, and technology has allowed a whole ecosystem of entrepreneurship, of small enterprises, of small retail to flourish. At the same time, you see the emergence of digital oligarchies and digital monopolies, and the big companies are using technology for accumulating vast sums of power, control and wealth as well. We need a new renaissance of social sciences. We need new theories of political aggregation. We need new economics, and we need new attention to the most important question of our future, the future of work. How will we create livelihoods? Where will the jobs come from? What are the skills that are required? How does a modern school change its curriculum to produce the champions of tomorrow? What should change in our school education? What should change in our college education? Is education important at all in the age of Google? Do we need to ask students to read books? Or do we allow them 1 hour of internet time to come up with solutions to the central question the teachers may pose on the blackboard in that particular classroom? Like any other degree, I think for me, the PhD degree that I undertook offered me 3 opportunities. The first, it allowed me to interact with smart people. I met peers, I met my advisors, I met my professors, I met others who were doing PhDs, and I was able to interact with a whole new community of serious people who were passionate about that one thing that was defining them and driving them. So one was, it allowed me to meet smart people with a lot of passion. The second offering of my PhD was the ability to put in long hours of work. You have to be obsessive about doing a PhD, only then will you get it done. For 3 to 4 years, there is nothing else more important in your life. You will have to steal moments from your other parts to be able to complete your PhD. You will have to sleep for 3 to 4 hours a day for months at end if you want to complete your project. The third element, of course, was that even as you do all of this, you have to be humble. I think it teaches you humility. When you start exploring the area that you want to research on, you begin to realize how much others have already accomplished in this field. There is no age to aspire to do a PhD. I began my PhD in my early 40s. People do it in their 20s. People do it just after completing their masters and having worked for a couple of years. I think you should embark on a PhD when you believe you are ready to do that, when you are sure about the area you want to dedicate the rest of your life to, when you are passionate about something. There is no age for a PhD. In fact, I would tell my peers in modern school, my batchmates in modern school, why don't some of you go and do a PhD? I would use this opportunity to reach out to all the young modernites out there and to all the minds out there. Please walk in, talk to me, talk to my colleagues. We are 100 scholars who sit in the Delhi office. We'll be happy to engage with you and share our experiences. We are not the ones who will give you an answer. We will only give you our stories. For me, I chose physical fitness as a means of allowing myself to recover from long hours that I put in front of the computer screen. I have rigorously followed a disciplined regime. I still try to put in between 7 to 10 kilometers a day, either walking or running. The other interesting learning for me as I evolve in my research career has been that I now never ever allow myself to be doing only one particular project. I like to have a number of projects at different stages in the bouquet of work at any given time. And even as I am writing a long book on, say, global governance of the future, I am doing a equally exciting project on India-China relationships in different sectors.